Isn't it kind of strange, because marketing is a big thing, and I've talked about this before when we talk about all these football leagues and about how obviously like the CFL was an established brand, but yet people want to keep starting their own new American football leagues instead of essentially just buying the established brand and bringing it, to American eyeballs and expanding it that way. But it's kind of funny because of the two Forbidden Door pay-per-view events, I think that attendance-wise at least, is going to be lower than what we essentially saw in the, 2019 version of this. And we saw it, I think, in 2018 and stuff as well. But 2019, the one that sticks out, Ring of Honor and New Japan, Supercard of Honor, WrestleMania weekend, was essentially a pay-per-view similar to this. It was Ring of Honor wrestlers, which before AEW, which were AEW wrestlers for the most part, and New Japan. So this kind of model, we actually already saw Madison Square Garden, and Madison Square Garden drew just about 19,000. So it's weird that they're going to get less people watching it at Scotiabank Arena than they did seeing the Ring of Honor versus New Japan show in 2019. But the reason I tied that in to like the CFL talk is the branding of things is because yes, I know Tony Khan owns Ring of Honor, but it kind of still befuddles me a little bit because of what AEW wanted to be and what it became, in the sense that instead of just buying out Ring of Honor and then just expanding Ring of Honor to be what AEW is nowadays, because that's really what Ring of Honor was at its core. It was Cody Rhodes, the Young Bucks, Kenny Omega, all those guys. He made AEW, which in turn put Ring of Honor out of business because they're like, you're just doing what we're doing, but you got a national TV contract. And then he obviously bought Ring of Honor and kind of turned it into his developmental thing. But yeah, I mean, Ring of Honor obviously was doing this before and was doing it to some success. It was probably the most successful thing that they were doing every year was that Supercard of Honor. Clearly, it was the only arena show that they were running like that. But it is kind of strange because, at the end of things, you look at this, and as it is a special attraction for AEW, these competitors, let's say like Omega versus Ospreay, right? We've obviously seen it in New Japan, but if Tony Khan bought Ring of Honor and just, put Ring of Honor on TNT every single week and then turned it into, essentially what we have now, we'd have these same matches. Because I remember going to Ring of Honor, Supercard of Honor in New Orleans the year before AEW ever existed. And what's your main event? Cody Rhodes, Kenny Omega. And that's when Kenny Omega was more of the New Japan guy and Cody Rhodes is more of the Ring of Honor guy. So like those kind of matches that we're seeing here, we've kind of already seen. And then Kenny Omega obviously wasn't involved in the 2019 because of his ties in with AEW, which again, they booked Madison Square Garden thinking, we're going to have Kenny Omega, Cody Rhodes, and the Young Bucks for this Madison Square Garden show. Little do they know that essentially someone was just going to create a new Ring of Honor just on a national scale, and that's what we have today with AEW.
Here's my thing, though. So, like, how I think, how I think of Ring of Honor and AEW and how Tony Khan started AEW and not that far into its life, it bought Ring of Honor. I feel like, in a way, some people may agree with me, people may not. But what Tony Khan was thinking all along was, if AEW can make it, well, I have enough money because he's a billionaire. Why don't I go buy Ring of Honor and make it my NXT? That's what I think I think that was the plan all along. I felt like he didn't want to take over Ring of Honor and potentially do something where it could run that into the ground. So he started his own brand. He started his own company. He's got the money for it, so he was able to...
he did run Ring of Honor into the ground because he eventually took its... Ring of Honor, the reason they were so unsuccessful during the pandemic is because what made them successful was all the people who are now in AEW. You know what I mean?
He didn't exactly kill it, though, because if you think about it, he's keeping it alive because the way he did it was, he's like, okay, I'm going to, like you mentioned, Young Bucks, even Samoa Joe, Claudio, all these big names, they have ties to Ring of Honor. Bryan Danielson, CM Punk back in the day. Like, you have so many of these names. So for me, how I look at it is, you know what? You're right in one aspect of it in particular. Where yes, he took a lot. Tony Khan we're talking about. He took a lot of that talent from the Ring of Honor, the Ring of Honor roster, and elevated it to his own brand. But in his way of still giving back to the wrestling world, he was like, okay, I'm a billionaire. AEW is doing really good. I got a bunch of guys from New Japan, a bunch of guys from Ring of Honor. I got some guys that, left WWE. I'm doing pretty good over here. But you know what? Like, yeah, I kind of buried Ring of Honor for a little bit there. I think the best thing to do is I'm going to buy the library, I'm going to buy everything, and I'm going to make it my NXT. So, and I think the way Tony Khan looks at it is he has a bunch of money, and usually when you start a new venture, a new business, you're not making money for a little bit. So I don't think he's worried about that. And for me, I think he's a wrestling fan. So I think he just likes the fact that he's able to give more wrestlers a chance to make a living into something they love doing. So even, that's how I look at it, because for a long time, WWE was pretty much the main. If you're going to make a good living, there's a few guys in Ring of Honor that have done very well. We know that. But if you're going to make a great living in the wrestling realm, WWE was really the place to go. But now he's opened so many avenues where there's so many people making more money, across the board than it's ever been, made in the business. So I give Tony Khan credit for that. Some of his tactics I don't agree with. I don't like how he books certain things, but that's just nitpicky. But when you're giving so many more wrestlers the chance to live out their dream, but also give them a livable wage, they can make a career out of it, and they can, provide for their families and not have to go get a side hustle to make ends meet. I'm good with it. And in the way he did it, I think in the long run, I think it's going to be good overall for the wrestling business.
I think, and I'll try to end on this, when it comes to that tie-in with owning a company that's already existent, I can see essentially what, if I was head Tony Khan here, I'm imagining this is what he would tell me, and it's probably similar to the people who start the new football leagues is what they would tell me. Yes, these are established brands like Ring of Honor and the Canadian Football League, right? Yes, people are familiar with them, but the negatives that do come with buying a familiar brand is the fact that you're trying to get new eyeballs on it, yes, but the idea is that people aren't going to look at it as something completely brand new, so it's going to be tough to get off the ground because you're essentially trying to just introduce it to a new audience. It's like the difference between taking a movie that was in Japan and then releasing it in the United States versus just releasing a brand new movie entirely that has no reputation at all. So with AEW, we all tuned in on the very first week because it was all brand new to us, and it was like a completely different thing. Now, if AEW was just Ring of Honor on national TV, we might have just thought it's just a continuation of Ring of Honor, similar to those football leagues. People tune into the XFL week one every single time around because it's brand new. They want to see if they're playing football. Are they on springs and trampolines? What are they doing? What kind of wild thing are they coming up with? Because this is a brand new league, brand new teams, brand new players. Never heard of any of this. It's like all rainbows and colors in my eyes that I've never seen before. But if it was the CFL, while an established brand and while it has all these teams you're familiar with, people might see it as flipping through the TV and go, oh, the CFL. Okay, I've seen that before. Click. And not realize it's like a rebirth of it, a new version of it, a version that is like the XFL, something they've never seen before. Because that's, I think, like seeing AEW on your television guide is going to get you to click, I guess, at the beginning of their, existence because you've never seen that before. When Ring of Honor you have seen before, but somebody who doesn't watch a lot of wrestling might just think they've seen it before, like, oh, it used to be on at midnight, now it's on at 8 o'clock on TNT, but it's probably just the same program. Next, click.
Well, here's the thing. To be honest, though, from an American football standpoint, the XFL, I was reading different things about, they lost money, and again, most businesses don't start in the green off the gate. They usually are losing money for the first few years. And what I was reading was The Rock and his ex-wife, but also she's the co-owner of the entire company, Miss Garcia. She even came out and said, we have an idea. We already know what we're going to do. So, yes, we didn't make money this year, but they have a plan in place. I think you're going to see XFL run its course for a few years. I think the USFL is going to be around for a few years, too. And that's far off from where I was when we talked about this.
I think we'll agree to disagree because I think the USFL won't be around. If it's around next year, I'll be surprised. And if it's around the year after that, I'll be really surprised.
Here's the thing, though. The difference is, though, people love football. That in America. That's America. Americans cannot get enough football. Just like if you go in other places in the world, you're going over to the UK, you're going across the pond. How many different leagues of soccer do they have? You know what I mean? They don't just have the English Premier League. There's so many different leagues that are in the. So that, like, how I look at it is European countries look at soccer the way Americans look at American football. So, like, to me, I'll be honest with you. We talked about this a long, maybe 6 months ago. I mean, we talked about this before, and I thought maybe one or the other would make it, XFL versus USFL. But to be honest with you, the more I hear about it, the more I watch it, there's a purpose for these leagues, and to be honest with you, I do think they're going to be sustainable. Yes, are they making a ton of money? No.
I'll disagree with you and say similar to AEW and wrestling in the United States of America, right? And it has to do with WWE and why tickets for Money in the Bank are so expensive and stuff like that. Ties in with the football thing, and that is, I don't think America loves football as much as they love the brands associated with the football. The reason WWE gets so many for WrestleMania, even though they haven't put on any 5-star matches at WrestleMania like AEW does, we're going to see a match at AEW Forbidden Door between Kenny Omega and Will Ospreay that I promise you, at its worst, will be a better wrestling match than anything you saw at WrestleMania in all the 8 hours of that event. But I will tell you what people are going to be tuning into WrestleMania for versus tuning into AEW Forbidden Door is because of the brand and what the spectacle of it is. They know they're not just here to watch. There's a reason why kids play football in the park every single day, and you don't see cars pulling over just to check it out, because it's not the Packers and the Cowboys. It's not the brands they're familiar with. Alabama could put a Division IV team on the field tomorrow, but as long as they're still putting on the Alabama jersey and still doing the chants and having the special walkout when they come out and having the cheerleaders, it's still going to be Alabama football. It's still going to be that brand. And I think the same with AEW, WWE. That's why I was a little skeptical when AEW first started, but like I said, I think it's good that they started, I guess, on their own footing as a way to get eyeballs, and to make it seem like this is a real competitor. Because again, maybe if they did just buy Ring of Honor and elevate them, people would think, okay, but you're not really trying to compete with WWE because you're not really going balls to the wall. You're just kind of taking something like you're taking a minor league baseball team and you're just putting some more money behind it. You're not really trying to make another actual competitor like AEW has actually proven they're trying to do. Well, we won't compete with WWE in that extent because of the branding that is WWE.
I'll end with this, though. I gotta cut you off real quick. I gotta end with this. I was just thinking about it, and I didn't want to lose it. So how I look, and I made this point earlier with AEW and Ring of Honor, Tony Khan, giving more wrestlers a chance to make a living in the business. I like that. Obviously, I want to see people chase their dreams, and maybe they make it to the big time and they make the big bucks. That's how I look at the NFL, the USFL, the XFL. And to be honest with you, as a Cowboys fan, you mentioned the Cowboys Packers. The Dallas Cowboys had the USFL MVP on their team last year. And he's still on the roster. So there is a purpose for the league, and it gives guys that maybe were overlooked, maybe they had some things that happened, they're still making a okay living, trying to live out their dream, which is to maybe make it to the NFL, and then in this case, maybe the AEWs or the WWEs of the world. I'll end with that.
All right. I mean, I will give AEW the credit here, though, and that's unlike, I guess, the USFL and the XFL and things like that, is they provide something of, and here's why I think one football league that will, they've made it many times. They keep coming back, and I have more, I guess, thoughts of their success and more belief in their success, and that's the arena football leagues, because they provide something completely different. And with AEW this weekend, the one good thing is they're not, and this is why Impact essentially failed. You want to talk about, why things succeed? Why Impact never truly competed with WWE? Because they were trying to be WWE. They're bringing in the big names like the Kurt Angles and the Hulk Hogans and trying to do the spectacle, but without the WWE brand. AEW, from what we see this weekend at Forbidden Door, is showing you that what keeps them afloat is being an alternative and being something completely different. This weekend, Danielson and Okada, MJF and Tanahashi, Omega and Will Ospreay, they are going to give you something that even if they were in WWE, they probably wouldn't even give you in WWE. They can only give it to you here in New Japan. So it truly is that alternative. It is something different. I like it as the alternative. I like it as a chance to give people, obviously, like you're saying, more jobs, which means gives WWE more talent down the line, and it gives us this alternative now. It gives us this different look. That's why I said Impact never worked out, because they were trying to give us WWE Raw back in 2005. live, but with washed up guys. And that's why WCW essentially failed, because it was also trying to be like WWE with jokey storylines and silliness, but it just fluttered out in the 2000s because they couldn't do it no more. But AEW's given us that alternative, and I think this weekend should be a good show. I think they should just keep it at 4 matches. 4 matches, a 2-hour pay-per-view. I'm good. But I'll be tuning in to Forbidden Door. I'd probably be there if I wasn't going to be out of town. I can tell you, there's a Blue Jays Oakland A's game at 1 in the afternoon. At 8 o'clock at night, you got just next door at Scotiabank Arena, you got Forbidden Door. Tickets obviously aren't that expensive, and there's lots of good seats available. Collision's also that night, Saturday night. So Blue Jays and AEW weekend in Toronto, I would definitely be making that weekend.